The House of Representatives just passed a bill banning gender-affirming care for minors across the United States of America. Now, this, of course, is one of the many promises of the Trump administration that they are now making good on and saving children's lives in the process. But of course, the left and leftists are going to tell you that they are eliminating trans people and literally killing children. So today, as a former leftist, I'm going to respond to those leftists. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
Guys, before we get into today's video, please like and subscribe. Today is a good day. Now, this might not go through and it will hit the Senate and then it will get shot down. But as of today, the U.S. House of Representatives have banned gender-affirming care for minors here in the United States of America. Now, just to give you the basis for this argument and for what's happening legislatively, let's turn to RFK Jr., our health secretary, so that he can explain why he's doing this.
Doctors assume a solemn obligation to protect children. Yet doctors across the country now provide needless and irreversible sex-rejecting procedures.
Now, I love that he calls it sex-rejecting procedures rather than gender-affirming care. We've heard gender-affirming care, and it's been plastered all over this movement, which is essentially trying to insinuate that you are not allowing a child to affirm who they actually are if you do not allow them to mutilate their bodies, receive puberty blockers, and essentially go through a medical process that creates irreversible damage. It is not gender-affirming care. We know the gender and sex of these children. This is sex rejection procedures, as he states.
Violate their sacred Hippocratic oath by endangering the very lives that they are sworn to safeguard. The American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, peddled the lie that chemical and surgical sex-rejecting procedures could be good for children who suffer from gender dysphoria. They betrayed the estimated 300,000 American youth ages 13 to 17, conditioned to believe that sex can be changed. They betrayed their Hippocratic oath to do no harm. So-called gender-affirming care has inflicted lasting physical and psychological damage on vulnerable young people. This is not medicine, it is malpractice.
And he's absolutely right. And I just want everybody to think about the age range which he just focused on, and that's 13 to 17. Think about who you were at 13 to 17. I know who I was at 13 to 17. I was a raging leftist, as I said in this video, who probably would have been very sympathetic to a movement like this. But now that you get a little bit of time past those formative years where your mind is so malleable, where you're taking in so much sensory information, so many external forces are influencing you, you're going through puberty, there's just hormonal roller coasters that you're on every single day. When you're out of that, you realize, okay, I needed time to slow down. I needed time to process. I needed time to take everything in. There was no way that I knew who I was deep down as an individual other than, you know, the prepackaged form that we sort of come in with our sex. And of course, there are going to be children who think that they are a different sex, who think they want to play around with gender a little bit. And that's part of the natural process that many of us go through. But that does not mean that you need sex rejection procedures and therapies. It does not mean you need gender affirming care. And we've sold this lie to children and we've left them with irreversible damage. And he's spoken about a little bit of that damage. We're not only talking about the psychiatric problem that we are now thrusting upon children who are going through something very difficult, gender dysphoria, puberty, just the ins and outs of just being a child in general. And you're going to mix that with medical procedures that leave their bodies in a condition that nobody wants. Let's be honest there, okay? We're talking about genital mutilation, breast surgeries, and chests being cut open. We're talking about puberty blockers and drugs like Lupron. And if you are not familiar with the drug Lupron, it is literally given to sex offenders to sterilize them so they can no longer offend. This is the type of medication we are giving to children who are experiencing gender dysphoria and who are thinking they want to transition sexes. We have to think about this further. When he calls this malpractice, it's exactly what it is. And we know that not only in just using our logic and reason outside of the bias that we may apply to these issues, but we know it from the stories of detransitioners, of kids who have gone through this process and realized this is not for them, and they've been left with the irreversible damage. Now, RFK rightfully shouts out Chloe Cole, a young girl who did go through the process of transitioning and is now on the other end of detransitioning and is experiencing life as somebody who has gone through these procedures. And as I said, and I'll say it again, irreversible damage now sits with her and sits in her future. And we'll get into what that damage looks like in a moment, but let's hear more from RFK.
We're done with junk science driven by ideological pursuits, not the well-being of children. peer-reviewed report published by the HHS Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health last month confirms that sex-rejecting procedures impose medical dangers and lasting harm on children who receive these interventions. So today we are taking 6 decisive actions guided by gold standard science and the week 1 executive order from President Trump to protect children from chemical and surgical mutilation. This morning, I signed a declaration. Sex-rejecting procedures are neither safe nor effective treatment for children with gender dysphoria.
And I just want to note here that we are not the only people who are going through this process. We are, in fact, joining a handful of other countries who have made this very same decision. We're joining Germany, Finland, Sweden, France, and the UK is currently in their own process of going through this as well, with thousands of young children who have been exploited by the medical system who are now suing doctors, insurance companies, and going back and forth over this issue of having transitioned in a state that is just unimaginable for anybody to be going through a medical process like this. So we are not alone. I know a lot of people, and I would have said as a leftist, this is just because the US is so oppressive. We are sexist, we're homophobic, we're transphobic. This is why we're doing this in this country. It's tyranny. It's a dictatorship. It is not that. Many other medical organizations and associations are going through this very similar process, and they're doing it based on data. This is not something that is feelings based, like much of the gender dysphoria and LGBTQ movements that we're seeing right now in this country are. This is based on science and fact. And if we want people to follow the science, as so many of us have been saying, and especially on the left, this is what you would be doing. We have so many different studies now that are starting to come together and prove this. We have the proof that now the transgender community, one of the smallest demographics in our country, has the highest rate of suicidal ideation. And it's not just here in the United States. We've seen studies like this out of Sweden that prove that even after transitioning and going through the medical processes to affirm gender, these individuals are killing themselves and experiencing suicidal ideation at a rate unlike we've seen before.
These procedures fail to meet professionally recognized standards of care. Medical professionals or entities providing sex-rejecting procedures to children are out of compliance with these standards of healthcare. This declaration is a clear directive to providers to follow the science and the overwhelming body of evidence that these procedures hurt, not help children. Additionally, CMS is proposing 2 new rules. The first rule will bar hospitals that participate in Medicare and Medicaid, which is almost every hospital.
I can also point you guys to the CAS report/review out of the UK that goes into these issues, particularly as they pertain to minors, and also shows just the lack of medical care, the lack of foresight and thought taken by these doctors who are prescribing this sort of medication to children and allowing them to mutilate their bodies. And we have to ask the question, if we are deducing now that these procedures are not helping children, they are in fact hurting children, and the data supports that, who is being helped by this process? Is it doctors? Is it pharmaceutical companies and insurance? Look into it. It's very interesting. You'll hear from a lot of these children who said they've experienced gender dysphoria, and then their parents end up taking them to gender clinics, and the fast track that they are on towards receiving gender affirming care, sex rejection care, is unbelievable. We are talking a matter of weeks and months for some of these individuals where they are now being placed on puberty blockers. They are now being set on a track to receive surgeries that will alter their bodies like they've never been altered before. And with these children, once they've undergone these surgeries, we're talking about, for girls who end up having their breasts lopped off, an inability to breastfeed your children, a lack of sensation in the chest for many of them, with the procedures that are happening downstairs, which are largely experimental. There are so many different side effects that pop up on the other end of these surgeries, including a lack of sexual sensation for when they are adults and choose to engage romantically with other individuals. Not to mention the fact that a lot of these people and kids, once they're on these medications, they will be on these medications for life. You are quite literally becoming a medical patient for life when you are set on this track. So think what that means for doctors and insurance companies. Think about the payday that exists there. And maybe that will explain a little bit of why we've been able to go down this track and ignore the scientific data that's been coming out of the research that we've been doing here. Not to mention that a lot of our medical associations are cushioned and infiltrated by leftists who have decided this is the right thing to do for children, and they will push forward that narrative narrative, no matter what harm they do to the kids who are involved in this process. Now, I'll show you here the vote that took place. Now, Republicans voted 213 yay, 4 nay. Democrats, 3 yay, 207 nay. So you can see the political split on this. The left overwhelmingly thinks it is okay to transition children. And now you know a little bit about what that looks like, which I'm sure you knew before. This has been a huge conversation in this country. Now I'm going to show you some responses from leftists on the internet as this news is broken about the House passing this bill forward. Now, Evan writes, this is fucking disgusting and a war on innocent children. And this is nothing to say of the thousands of children who aren't trans, who needs hormone therapy and puberty blockers. Now, I imagine there's going to be some sort of caveat or some sort of fail-safe for those who need hormone therapy or puberty blockers, which is a minuscule amount of children in this country outside of experiencing gender dysphoria. Okay, I imagine there's going to be a fail-safe for that. Explain to me how this is a war on innocent children by not allowing them to undergo irreversible surgeries, by not allowing them to receive puberty blockers and drugs like Lupron. How is that a war on innocent children? I'd argue the war on innocent children is actually allowing these children to be convinced they are in the wrong body. What a torturous existence it must be to think you're in the wrong body and to become a lifelong medical patient, to run away from who you are as an individual. And this is not to say that you can express yourself in a very vivid way in all different bends of the gender spectrum or whatever that we're trying to refer to it as today. If you are a young girl who presents really masculinely and you're tomboyish and that's what you want to be that. If you are a young boy who is feminine and flamboyant and that's what you want to be that. But to become a lifelong medical patient because of these traits is absolutely ridiculous. And we're finding now, as we look into these cases, that largely the decisions made about these children is based on gender stereotypes, okay? Stereotypes that we've made up about what it means to be feminine and masculine. We are now projecting onto children and saying, if a boy acts like a girl, he must be a girl. And then they're becoming lifelong medical patients. It's certainly not right. Another tweets out, they say they're protecting kids. They're not. They're harming these kids by blocking their access to healthcare. These comments make clear what this is about, eliminating all trans people of all ages. If they get away with it with trans people, they're coming for you next. What does that even mean? Now, with these laws being passed, by all means, if you are an adult who believes that you are transgender, who is experiencing gender dysphoria, and you want to go through this medical process, you will be allowed to go through this medical process in this country. We do not allow children to get tattoos. We don't allow children to join the military. We don't allow children to go to the doctor and sign off on anything for themselves, let alone allowing them to lop their breasts off and go on puberty blockers. And for some reason, we have all been deluded into thinking that this is the reality that we need in this country for young children. Okay. And I believed it as a leftist. And now here we are on the other end of it, on the other end of actual facts and data. I'm interrupting today's video to bring you a message from a sponsor. That's different. That's new. Let's try it out. Today we are sponsored by Native Path. You've seen me talk many times about today's beauty culture with filler and Botox and plastic surgery. You've seen me even argue against that culture on platforms like Jubilee, yet you guys are still asking me about my skincare, at least for now. So today we're sponsored by Native Path Collagen. Of course, your body is already producing collagen, but when you take a collagen supplement, which helps with skin elasticity and reducing wrinkles, you're supporting the collagen production all over your body. One could even go as far as to say it's gender affirming care for both men and women. And for all you Make America Healthy Again folks who are watching right now, myself included, or anybody who's just concerned about health and wellness, this product has one ingredient and one ingredient only, the collagen. There's no heavy metals, no filler, no junk, no GMOs. This is actually real. It's not performative like some of the stuff that we are talking about today. It's just quite literally affirming processes that are already happening in your body. So if you'd like to start taking some Native Path collagen, you can go to getnativepath.com/Amala and get it on a special offer that will cut that retail price and give you free shipping. That's right. You can go to getnativepath.com/Amala. Now let's get back to the video. How did I do? Now I'm going to show you some of our representatives responding to this. This is Congresswoman Sarah McBride, who happens to be transgender. Now, is there a conflict of interest here with you being a transgender adult thinking that now kids need to transition as well? We found this when we had the assistant health secretary who also happened to be transgender, and he was advocating for young kids to be able to transition as well here in the United States of America. I wonder why that would be. If you're an adult who's already made that decision, why would you be rallying for minors to make that decision as well?
I get it's hard to understand what it feels like to be trans. I get that it is hard to understand what it feels like to be me. I get that it's hard to understand this care and understand the need for it. But one of the things that get so lost in this conversation is that the transgender adults of today were kids once. I was a kid once. I didn't have the courage to come out until I was 21. But it's a fact I have known about myself for my entire life.
The tattooed adults of today were kids once. The military-aged men and women who are serving right now in this country were kids once. Do we then go and go, oh, you guys were kids once. Let's let kids sign up for the military. Let's let kids get tattooed. Let's let kids make all these decisions that we say kids can't make because the guys who made it as adults were once children. That does not make sense. We cannot make those arguments. And you see, this is extremely manipulative as a congresswoman, but as just a person in general, to convince these kids that they're now in the battle of their life and for their life because you're an adult who decided to transition. It is not okay. And of course, because these people transitioned as adults and their identity is being questioned, they want more so than ever to affirm their identity to the entire world. And they are willing to sacrifice children along the way, sacrifice their lives, sacrifice their medical, histories, presence, and futures for their own agenda and for the affirmation of the gender that they've chosen. This is a selfish endeavor, and it is veiled as an endeavor that is meant to be protecting children and saving their lives when none of the data suggests it. None of it whatsoever. So think about the underlying motivations that this individual has to be convincing you that kids should be able to transition, and think about how manipulative that actually is. Let's keep watching.
I didn't have the courage to come out until I was 21, and that means 21 years of pain, 21 years of unwavering homesickness that only went away when I was able to get the care that I needed.
That is for you, and that is because you had convinced yourself that that is something that you've needed. Now, this is another very powerful manipulation tactic that they use to convince people that trans kids should be able to transition, to convince people that there are trans kids at all. And what Sarah McBride is essentially saying is, do you want a dead kid, a dead son, or a live daughter? That's what's being said. I went through 21 years of pain because I could not transition. Just allow the kid to be happy to live and to transition. And that is not the two options that you have here. It's not a dead son or a live daughter. It is actually a healthy son or a child that is going to struggle for the rest of their lives, medically, emotionally, psychiatrically. That's what you're choosing between. And you know what? I'm willing to grant that there can be outcomes on the other end of transition where people do feel happy. They are convinced that this is the right choice that they've made for themselves. It doesn't negate the fact that children should not be making those decisions. Parents of children should not be making that decision for their children. This is just something that should not be available to anybody who is a minor. And it's made more and more clear to us every single day. How many more studies do we need? How many more detransitioners do we need? Does Sarah McBride have an answer for that? I doubt it.
And my biggest regret in life is that I never had a childhood without that pain. I marvel at the courage of transgender young people today who are sharing themselves with their families and this world, despite the toxicity and the hate that too often emanates from the building behind me and from politicians within it.
This is the weaponization of childhood against children themselves. I mean, it's just insane to me. It's like a leftist activist saying, I live with all this anger and I never got to be an activist, and now I'm seeing all these kids from the Parkland shooting be activists, and I think that's just so wonderful. Now I'm seeing 5-year-olds who go out with their signs and say, this is Trump's America, or I hate the orange man, and I'm thinking, I wish I could do that as a kid. I wish I could unleash all of my anger and this huge frenzy that was existing inside my head as a 5-year-old and as a 10-year-old and as a 13-year-old. No, what I wish for you is that you had been spared all the anguish and all the tumultuous feelings that you were feeling as a child. Not that you could have confronted them sooner in a way that allowed you to transition to be a woman, which is something that you are not. We should wish to be uplifted out of the inner conflict that we're experiencing when we have gender dysphoria, not for people to be pushed further down the path. But Sarah McBride wants children to go through the same exact process that she went through, which in reality, if you're looking at this, even as a transgender individual, and I've met trans people who are super reasonable about this. They say, my transition was difficult. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. If these children can be saved out of this process, if these children can be spoken to in a way, receive therapy in a way, receive care in a way that makes them realize the actuality of their sex and of their gender, let's allow for that. And let's hope that that's the path that they fall down, not the path of being a lifelong medical patient. Now, those trans people, here we go. Give them applause, give them their flowers, because they're being honest. This is not honest.
All any of us want is to live a life of purpose and happiness and wholeness. None of us know how long we have. None of us know how much time we have on this planet. It is already hard enough to raise a family. It is already hard enough to be a kid, and government should not make it harder.
But you are actually advocating that they do make it harder, because everything proves that it is going to be harder. I mean, I could go on this for hours and hours and hours. I won't. I'll spare you that. I'm going to move on to another video here. This is New York AG James talking about this very same issue. I cannot imagine wishing this upon children, even if you are a supporter of trans rights and the LGBTQ plus community. And of course, I am largely a supporter of that community, so long as they are not infringing upon the lives of others and pushing ridiculous ideology. And as far as the gender and sexuality ideology goes, and the whole idea of transgenderism and gender dysphoria, it's not healthy. And we have so much to prove that it isn't, and especially for minors. So even trans people who have transitioned and experienced all that in life, they should be able to admit that as well. Here's AG James.
Hello, everyone. It's Tish James. I want to speak directly to the transgender community, especially to our young people and their families who count on gender-affirming care. I know this latest proposal from this administration to cut access to gender-affirming care for many youth is frightening. Whether you live in Brooklyn, Binghamton, Buffalo, or anywhere else in New York, and even if you don't live in New York, I will not let this administration come for you, your doctors, or your life-saving health care.
This is Black Mirror. It's giving Black Mirror. I don't know what else to put this through. This is so dystopian and strange. What is so off-putting and frightening and horrific about waiting? And guarantee you, if these individuals wait, by and large, the vast majority of them are not going to be transitioning. And of course, we have data to back this up. Let me just show you stories from actual transitioners. Here's a thing I saw on TikTok the other day. Okay, let's play this video.
What's going on here?
It says, me watching all of my trans friends from 2020 detransition in 2024/2025. We have graphs showing the identities as far as transgender and non-binary identities among young people. And it takes like a huge peak in 2020, 2022, 2023, and boom, a nosedive as kids stop identifying as transgender and non-binary. As I said, the data supports it. This is a social trend. It's a product of social contagion. And now kids are signing themselves up and realizing a year or two down the line, oh, okay, I was just going through a period in my life where I was struggling with identity, and now I realize I was born a girl or I was born a boy. That is what's happening. So instead of allowing that to happen in its natural progression, you want these kids to receive medical care that pushes them in that direction. Think, all of you, whether you're a left, right, whatever, especially if you're on the other end of puberty. If you're in the middle of puberty right now, what you doing here? Hi, good to see you. If you've gone through puberty, think about what that time was like for you. Think about all the thoughts that were raging through your head, if you can even think back to that. Think about all the things that your body was experiencing. Now think about blocking that. Think about stopping that process. Think about, on the other end of it, lopping your breast tissue off. Think about during puberty, if you're a woman right now, what did you think about having kids? Were you even pontificating upon that? Was that even a thought in your brain? Were you thinking about breastfeeding your kids when you were going through puberty or when you were 13 to 17 years old? Did you think about whether or not that's something you wanted to do? You wanted to maybe formula raise your child. Any of these thoughts crossing your mind? Well, apparently they're going through this with the kids who are transitioning. No? Are they asking them these questions? Probably not. Okay. Instead, they're pushing them down this path to where if you're a girl, you're not going to experience sexual sensation. Same thing for boys there. If you're a woman, you're not going to be able to breastfeed your children because your breasts have been lopped off. Never mind that they tried to sell us this idea that puberty blockers don't create any long-lasting damage, that you can just reverse them and everything's going to go back to normal. And now medical data suggests that that's not true at all. Literally at all. So let's keep watching and hear from AG James before we close out this video.
As of now, nothing has changed. Your health care is still legal and protected. And your doctors cannot cut off your access to gender-affirming care based on the administration's reckless proposal. And most importantly, I want you to know that you're not alone. I am right here with you, and I'm sending love to each and every one of you.
Yeah, because your representatives and politicians love you. They love you. That's what they're here for. They're here because they love you. Okay, yeah, let's check out A.G. James and see what else she has going for her in the state of New York and what else might be influencing her position as Attorney General. I have a feeling it's something else other than a deep love for each and every one of her constituents. Now, guys, I might sound angry or worked up about this, and it's because I am. It really does impact the present and futures for so many children in this country. But outside of all that, let's say you don't believe a word I said in this entire video. You're somebody who supports transitioning children, and you want trans kids to thrive through their gender dysphoria with medical practices that you've been convinced will lead to their thriving. Just for a moment, think about the possibility of being wrong on that. Okay. Even if there's no world in your mind right now in which you are wrong, just try to create one and think about the possibility that that is the case, and then work through every bit of damage that would have been created along the way if you are wrong. And I'm not saying that you're necessarily personally responsible for this damage. We have a far longer list of people to look at when it comes to that, with big pharma and insurance companies and a lot of these doctors and apparently academic associations that are thrusting this upon young children. We have them to look at first. But if you could be wrong, what does that mean for the future of these children? What does that mean for their bodies, their health? What does that mean for them psychologically, them physically? It means a lot. I mean, it's a lot of damage if you just so happen to be wrong. And if so much of the data that we're taking in right now is looking like that, okay? If a lot of the Western world is moving in the direction of not allowing minors to go through these surgeries, is there a possibility that you are wrong? And if so, what does that mean? Also, what does it mean for these children, as I said before, to wait past puberty, to wait when they're out of minordom and they can make these decisions as adults? Yes, okay, you might not be able to become a passing transgender person in the same way somebody who goes and does it before puberty can, but is that the argument that we should be making? That it's just easier to do it to children than it is to do it to adults? Probably not. So what is the real benefit? And to who is the benefit if we are allowing children to transition and change their sex? Something that we know ultimately we can't even do, right? At the end of the day, when we check you, we know the chromosomes, we know who you are, and we know what you are, and we can play around with fantasies and try to bend reality to our own whims, but in reality, we can't do that. So who's benefiting from this? Is it you, ultimately? Is it trans kids? Probably not. And those are my final thoughts and final questions for you guys. Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, I encourage healthy debate on this channel. If you disagree with anything I said in this video, duke it out, but do so respectfully. Healthy debate would be nice in the comments. And if you like this video, like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a video for you guys, which is every day. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.